As Denton pointed out and Martin pointed out earlier, Toby couldn't be here today, so I'm going to give you just a very quick sort of look at the harms that are associated with drug use among gay men. If you kind of looked at the arc we've gone through this morning with the presentations, you'll see that this is the sort of the last piece that we can look at that Flux has looked at, so we can see all the different outcomes that these men have experienced that we've been able to collect data about so far in the Flux study. All right, so the first slide I'm going to talk about is the consequences of drug use, and these are obviously these are self-reported data. And the interesting thing about this slide is where the percentages fall out, and to also notice how they appear to be fairly low, lower than what I would have personally probably expected when I looked at this the first time. And the highest things that are consequences that people report as a consequence or a harm of their drug use is problems with their family, friendship breakup, and being unable to pay their bills, which are probably not unsurprising things that would have come up in this particular set of questions. This slide is about the harms that are ascribed to drug use. Of the 617 men that answered these questions and that we are looking at the data for, accidentally hurt themselves. 15% of them was the highest reported harm, that like a physical harm that was reported by the men. And these are things that are probably a little less, what's what I'm looking for, objective. These are things that actually did go to a doctor. They can remember event associated with it, things like that. So these are probably things that would stick out in their mind as actual harms that had been experienced and that probably stuck with them in hindsight when they were answering these questions. As far as overdose is concerned, we asked men, as a group of all drugs, what their drug-related overdose history might have been. I can't remember. Was this for 12 months, or was this for the last? The previous 6 months. Sorry, for the previous 6 months in their questionnaire, and 6% said that they had any sort of drug-related overdose. And when we looked at crystal in particular, which is something that's obviously a focus of the panoply of drugs that we might be talking about, there was a 2% that had said that yes, they had overdosed more than once. And these particular questions were asked of their own perception of what an overdose might be. We gave them an idea of what the questions and the outcomes might have been, and how many times that might look like. But they got to choose what they believed in these questions to be the answer for what an overdose looked like for them. This slide is interesting because when we asked men on the left-hand side of the slide what they thought their level of crystal dependence was, 40% reported they thought they were addicted. And we did not give them a specific definition of what addicted meant. We let them decide what they thought might look like, addiction might look like for them. But then when we gave them a set of validated measures to answer about what addiction actually is and what the consequences and what the characteristics of addiction might be, and let them answer those questions specifically, it was actually significantly lower. It was only about 25 or 6% of the men who actually did come across on a validated scale as having the characteristics of being addicted. So it's interesting that more thought they were addicted than actually probably showed up in actual validated scale measures. And then we asked the men how concerned they were about their own drug use, and this is about drug use in general. 30% said they were concerned about their drug use for themselves, and 14% said that they thought that others were concerned or had expressed concern about their drug use. And what was interesting about that was that it was mostly friends and family that actually expressed that concern the most, or that they perceived that concern to come from. Things like work and their medical practitioners weren't the ones that were the highest percentage of people they thought were actually concerned about their drug use. And so to summarize what I've kind of just gone over to give you some context about the harms that can be added to the rest of the conversations we talked about this morning. A small proportion of these men have reported direct physical or medical harms. So most of them actually haven't had like a hospital admission or something like that. More of them report more social problems or familial problems. Some, but not an insignificant proportion of them, report ever having overdosed. Self-prescribed addiction may be higher than observed through a validated measure, and we've had several discussions about why that might be, and I think that's probably a good question to be investigated further. And a third of the men who use drugs in general express some concern about their use on some level, even a casual concern, maybe I'm using too much. It doesn't have to be as much as a concern about overuse or addiction. And about 1 in 7 have friends, family, or a colleague that express concern or they perceive to express concerns about any of their drug use across the board. So while most of the men in Flux don't seem to actually have a problematic set of drug use behaviors, there is a sizable minority of them for whom there are some negative consequences, and they're aware of them and they are perceiving them and reporting them back when we ask them these questions.